After 3 years of silence, a letter from my daughter finally arrived in our mailbox. My hands were shaking with hope. I thought this was forgiveness, reconciliation, a second chance. But just as I was about to open it, my wife stopped me and pointed out one small detail that didn't make sense. That single detail changed everything. What I uncovered next wasn't love or regret. It was a calculated lie, and it exposed someone who never expected to be caught. Before I tell you how one letter shattered years of silence and exposed something far darker than I ever imagined, do me a quick favor. Support this story by following the channel and dropping a comment about where you're watching from. It helps these stories reach the people who need them most. My hands shook as I lifted the envelope. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Olivia cut me out of her life. 3 birthdays without a call. 3 Christmases with gifts returned unopened. 3 years of pretending I didn't flinch every time I passed her childhood bedroom. And now a letter on August 31st. Her birthday. Daniel. I called, my voice already breaking. Helen, come here. I rushed up the porch steps. The envelope pressed to my chest like it might disappear if I let go. Inside the house, the afternoon sun stretched across the living room floor, dust floating in the light. Life had been moving forward without my daughter in it, but in that moment, everything stopped. Helen came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. She saw my face before she saw the envelope. "What happened?" she asked. I held it up. "It's from Olivia." Her breath caught. I watched hope and fear collide in her eyes as she stepped closer. "That's her writing," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and today of all days." Helen reached out, touching the corner of the envelope like it was fragile glass. "Are you ready to read it?" I didn't answer right away. 3 years earlier, I'd driven to Harbor Heights, convinced I could talk sense into my daughter, convinced I could protect her from a man I never trusted. That day ended with a door closing softly in my face, and my daughter choosing her husband over her parents. I sat down slowly on the couch, the envelope heavy now for a different reason. What if this is it? I said, what if she's finally ready? Helen sat beside me. Then we'll handle it together, whatever it says. Outside, a neighbor laughed while pulling groceries from a car. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. The world hadn't paused for our heartbreak. But inside this house, time had folded in on itself. I turned the envelope over, studying every detail. The return address was Olivia's Harbor Heights townhouse. No smudges, no rush strokes. Whoever wrote this had taken their time. She remembered. I said quietly, my birthday card didn't even get returned last year. But this was intentional. Helen nodded, tears already gathering. She always was thoughtful. My thumb slid under the flap. Wait! Helen's voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I froze. What? I asked. She leaned closer, squinting at the envelope. Give me that again. I handed it over, irritation and confusion bubbling up. Helen, please don't do this. Just look with me, she said. She lifted the envelope toward the window. Do you see the slant? She asked. I frowned. What slant? Olivia always writes to the right, Helen said. Always, even as a child. I looked again. The letters leaned slightly left. My stomach tightened. People change, I said. Handwriting changes. Not muscle memory, she replied quietly. And look at the pressure. Olivia presses hard when she writes. This is too light. She traced a finger over my name. And her A's, Helen continued. She makes them round. These are pointed. The room felt colder. You're overthinking, I said, but the words lacked conviction. Helen lowered the envelope slowly. Daniel, this isn't her. Silence crashed down between us. The hope I'd let myself feel, just for a few minutes, collapsed under its own weight. I took the envelope back, staring at it like it had betrayed me. If it's not Olivia, I said slowly, then who would do this? Helen didn't answer right away. Someone who knows, she said finally. Someone who knows we're estranged. Someone who knows today matters. My jaw tightened. Then we open it, I said. Because if someone's using my daughter's name, I need to know why. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I read aloud. Dear Dad, Helen flinched. I'm in the hospital. I need emergency surgery my insurance won't cover. The doctors say I need $15,000 immediately. Helen gasped. Please send it to this account. Time is critical. I don't have anyone else. The letter ended with, Your loving daughter, Olivia. The paper slipped from my hands. That's not how she talks, Helen said immediately. Not once has she ever written like this. And she'd never asked for money like this, I said. Not like this. Not crypto. Not panic. We stared at each other. Someone had studied our pain. Someone had weaponized it. I reached for the phone. I'm calling her, I said. Right now. The line rang. Voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. On the third call, I left a message I hadn't used in years. Olivia, it's Dad. Someone sent us a letter pretending to be you. Please call me back. Please. I hung up slowly. And in that moment, standing in my kitchen with a fake letter and a silent phone, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. Someone had opened a door that should have stayed closed, and they were about to regret it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Olivia's handwriting. Almost right, but not quite. Close enough to fool a grieving parent. Close enough to steal $15,000 from a man who would have given far more just to hear his daughter's voice again. By morning, the shock had hardened into something colder. Helen noticed it before I said a word. You're going to Harbor Heights, she said quietly as she poured coffee. Yes. She didn't argue. She just reached for my hand and squeezed it. Be careful, and don't let them twist this back on you. That warning followed me all the way to the car. The drive from Brookfield to Harbor Heights felt longer than it should have. Traffic crawled. Red lights lingered. My thoughts kept circling the same questions. Who had access to Olivia's address? Who knew we hadn't spoken in 3 years? Who knew exactly how desperate I was to hear from her? I already knew the answer. I just didn't want to admit it. When I parked 2 blocks from her townhouse, my chest tightened, not from fear, but from memory. I'd stood here before, 3 years ago, full of certainty, full of warnings she didn't want to hear. This time, I wasn't here to lecture. I was here to protect her, or expose someone. The doorbell chimed softly when I pressed it. Footsteps approached almost immediately. The door opened, and there she was, Olivia, older, thinner, more guarded, but unmistakably my daughter. Dad, she said, flat and surprised. What are you doing here? I need to ask you something, I said, holding up the letter. Did you write this? Her eyes scanned the page. Confusion crossed her face. Real confusion, not defensive anger. No, she said instantly. I didn't. Relief and dread collided in my chest. This came in yesterday's mail, I said. On your birthday. Her lips parted slightly. That's impossible. I haven't written to you. I know. She looked up at me sharply. Then why would you think I did? I didn't, I said. Not once I looked closer. Someone forged it. Her expression hardened. So you drove all the way here because of scam letter? I drove here because someone used your name, I said, and because I was afraid it might be connected to something worse. Behind her, a familiar figure appeared in the hallway. Adrian. He leaned against the wall casually, arms crossed, the picture of calm concern. What's going on? He asked, already knowing the answer. Dad thinks someone is pretending to be me, Olivia said. Asking for money. Adrian frowned. That's awful. You should report it. I watched his face closely. $15,000, I said. His jaw tightened for half a second. So quick Olivia missed it. Specific amount, I continued. Medical emergency. Urgent payment. Scammers do that, Adrian said smoothly. They prey on emotions. On parents, I corrected. Especially parents who haven't heard from their child in years. Olivia stiffened. Dad. I'm not accusing you, I said quickly. I came to warn you. Adrian stepped closer to her, his hand settling on her shoulder. "We appreciate the warning," he said. "But showing up unannounced like this is not appropriate." "I tried calling," I said. "You shouldn't have," Olivia snapped. "This just feels like another excuse to interfere." The words stung, but I expected them. "What matters," I said calmly, "is that someone close to you knew enough to do this convincingly." Adrian's smile didn't waver. "You're reaching." "Am I?" I asked. "Who else would know about the silence? About your birthday? About your handwriting?" "That information isn't private," he said quickly. "Your handwriting samples are." I replied. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Olivia noticed it too. "Adrian," she said slowly. He straightened. "This conversation is over." "I agree," she said. "Dad, you need to leave." I nodded. "I will, but keep that letter." "I don't want it." "You should," I said, "because whoever wrote it will try again." The door closed quietly in my face. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain, listening to the lock slide into place. I hadn't convinced her, but I'd planted something far more important. Doubt. Back home, Helen listened without interrupting as I recounted every detail. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, lips pressed tight. He reacted. She said, "Yes," and too fast. "Yes." "Then we wait," she said. "People who lie under pressure always make mistakes." 3 days passed. No letter. No call. Then, on Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang. Helen opened it. Olivia stood there, soaked from the rain, clutching a thick folder. "I was wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "About everything." She dropped the folder onto the table. Inside were pages, practice sheets, handwriting drills, copies of her name, our address, drafts of the letter. My knees nearly gave out. "I found them in his desk," she said, "hidden under receipts." Helen pulled her into a hug as Olivia broke down. "He owes money," she whispered. "Gambling. More than he told me." I closed my eyes. "Dad," she said through tears, "you were right, and I didn't listen." I wrapped my arms around her. "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." She looked up at me, eyes red but clear. "I'm leaving him." The rain tapped softly against the windows as the truth finally settled into place. The lie that had kept us apart was exposed, and the man who thought he could profit from our silence had just lost everything. Olivia didn't sleep that night either. She sat at the kitchen table long after Helen went to bed, the rain still whispering against the windows, the folder of evidence open in front of her like a crime scene, pages of practice lies, careful repetitions of her own handwriting, drafts that grew more confident, more convincing, more cruel. I watched her from across the table, saying nothing. This wasn't a moment for lectures, or forgiveness speeches, or "I told you so." This was a reckoning she needed to reach on her own. "He practiced," she said finally, her voice hollow. "He practiced my name like it was a signature he was entitled to." "Yes," I said quietly. "He knew how desperate you'd be." I nodded once. That part hurt the most. Her fingers tightened around one of the pages. "I let him convince me you were the problem." I leaned forward. Manipulators don't break people all at once. They isolate them first. She swallowed hard. "He always had a reason," she said. "Why I shouldn't visit. Why calling was inconvenient. Why you and Mom were judgmental. It never felt dramatic, just reasonable. That's how control works," I said. "It wears the mask of concern." She pushed the folder away as if it burned. "I'm filing for divorce in the morning." Helen appeared in the doorway, robe wrapped tight, eyes soft but alert. "I'll make breakfast," she said gently. "You've had enough for one night." The next morning, Olivia called in sick to work. I drove her back to Harbor Heights. Not to reconcile, not to negotiate, but to retrieve her belongings while Adrian was gone. The house looked the same. Minimalist, polished, carefully curated to project success. But now I could see the cracks. The unopened bill stacked neatly in a drawer. The second credit card Olivia didn't recognize. The safe tucked behind winter coats in the hall closet. Did you know about this? I asked, nodding toward it. She shook her head. He said it was for passports. Inside were casino receipts, loan notices, one handwritten IOU. The total made my chest tighten. This is why, she whispered. This is why he was desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy, I said. And cruel. She packed only what mattered. Clothes, documents, personal items. Not the art, not the furniture, none of the illusion. As we were leaving, her phone buzzed. Adrian, where are you? She didn't answer. By noon, her lawyer had confirmed what we already suspected. Forgery, fraud, attempted financial exploitation. Enough to destroy him professionally, if she chose to pursue it. I don't want revenge, she said as we sat in the lawyer's office. I know, I replied. I just want him out of my life. That evening, Adrian came to our house. Unannounced. Helen saw him through the window and stiffened. He's here. I'll handle it, I said. I stepped outside before he could knock. He smiled when he saw me. A tired smile. A calculated one. Mr. Carter, he said, we need to talk. You need to leave, I said. Olivia's upset, he said. You filled her head with nonsense. I held up the folder. His eyes flicked to it, then away. She found your practice sheets, I said. The drafts, the receipts. Silence stretched. Then his smile faded. She doesn't understand, he said quietly. I was under pressure. You forged her handwriting, I said, on her birthday. He exhaled sharply. I needed help. You needed money, I corrected. You'd have given it, he snapped. You would have sent it without question. Yes, I said, because I love my daughter. He stared at me then, really stared. And you try to turn that into profit. His jaw clenched. This doesn't have to go any further. It already has, I said. Olivia appeared behind me. Get out, she said, her voice steady but shaking. Live. Now. He looked at her like a stranger. You're choosing him, he said bitterly. I'm choosing truth, she replied. The door closed. The lock turned. For the first time in 3 years, I watched my daughter stand firm. The fallout was swift. Adrian's accounts were frozen within a week. His creditors surfaced. His lies unraveled under scrutiny. Friends distanced themselves. Colleagues stopped returning calls. The man who thrived on image collapsed under reality. Olivia moved back home temporarily. Her old room felt smaller, but warmer. We ate dinner together again. Talked about work. About plans. About things that didn't involve fear. One afternoon, as she sorted through childhood photos with Helen, she paused on a picture of herself at 10, missing a tooth, laughing into the sun. I forgot this version of me, she said softly. She never went anywhere, Helen replied. She was just waiting. Weeks later, a final envelope arrived. No handwriting. No pretense. A legal notice. Adrian was being sued by one of his lenders. Criminal charges were under review. Olivia didn't smile when she read it. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in the trash. I don't feel relieved, she said. That's normal, I told her. Closure doesn't always feel loud. That night, we burned the fake letter in the sink. The paper curled. The ink vanished. And with it, the last lie that had stood between us. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The silence after Adrian left didn't feel empty. It felt watchful, like the pause before something finished unfolding. For days, Olivia barely checked her phone. When messages came in, unknown numbers, vague apologies, thinly veiled threats, she deleted them without reading twice. She was done giving fear oxygen. But Adrian wasn't done. He never was the type to accept an ending he didn't control. It started subtly. A charge on Olivia's credit card she didn't recognize. Small, almost polite. A streaming subscription she'd never used. Then another, ride-share fees in a city she hadn't visited in months. She froze when she saw the alerts. I closed that account, she said, staring at her phone. I changed the passwords. You did, Helen said calmly, which means he didn't guess. I already knew what that meant. He still has access, I said, somewhere you wouldn't think to look. We spent the next 6 hours auditing her digital life like investigators. Old devices, shared clouds, permissions she granted years ago without a second thought. And then we found it, a dormant tablet, registered Olivia's name, still logged into her primary email, hidden behind a false wall in the garage at Harbor Heights. She stared at the photo the private investigator sent. That was his idea, she whispered. He said it was for music while he worked. Control isn't always loud. I reminded her. Sometimes it hums quietly in the background. By the next morning, the tablet was seized, the accounts locked down, and a formal digital harassment complaint filed. Adrian escalated. He began contacting extended family. Old colleagues of mine. Friends Olivia hadn't spoken to in years. The story he told was consistent and convincing. That Olivia was unstable. That grief and estrangement had unbalanced her. That I had manipulated her into paranoia. That the letter was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. He weaponized calm. I've never seen someone lie so gently, Helen said one night, scrolling through a message forwarded by a cousin. It's chilling. That's when Olivia made a decision that surprised me. I want to confront him, she said. I didn't answer right away. Not alone, she added, and not emotionally. I want him on record. The plan came together quietly. Her lawyer arranged mediation. Official, documented, recorded. Adrian accepted immediately. He still believed charm could erase facts. The meeting took place in a neutral office downtown. Glass walls, soft lighting, everything designed to encourage civility. Adrian arrived early. Suit pressed, hair neat, the picture of a reasonable man unfairly accused. Olivia walked in without hesitation. She didn't look at him at first. The mediator began with formalities, ground rules, purpose. Adrian nodded sympathetically the entire time. I want to start by saying I love Olivia, he said smoothly. Everything I did was to protect our future. Olivia finally looked at him. You practiced my handwriting, she said flatly. He sighed. I was trying to help us. I thought your parents. Stop, she said. Answer the question. He paused. Just a fraction too long. Yes, he said, but only because... And you had a tablet to monitor my emails. Another pause. Yes, and you used my estrangement from my parents to extract money. I was under pressure, he snapped, the veneer cracking. You don't understand what it's like when people are coming after you. I understand exactly what it's like, she said. You made sure of that. The mediator cleared her throat. Mr. Reed, do you acknowledge that impersonating your spouse constitutes fraud? Adrian leaned back, exhaling. I made a mistake. No, Olivia said. You made a strategy. Silence settled heavy in the room. Then she slid a folder across the table. Receipts, practice sheets, bank statements, screenshots, the tablet's data logs. He didn't touch them. I want a clean divorce, Olivia said. No delays, no claims, no contact. And if I refuse, he asked quietly. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Then this becomes public, she said. And professional. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't, he said. She smiled faintly. You taught me how. The meeting ended without drama. Adrian signed. 2 weeks later, his name appeared in a local business bulletin. Under investigation. Clients vanished overnight. The man who thrived on perception couldn't survive transparency. Olivia moved into her own apartment across town. Small, sunny, entirely hers. The first night, she invited us over for dinner. It wasn't fancy. Pasta, salad, candles from a discount store. But she cooked with ease, laughed freely. At one point, she stopped mid-conversation and said, I forgot what this felt like. What? Helen asked, not bracing. Olivia replied, not waiting for the next thing to go wrong. That night, as Helen and I drove home, she squeezed my hand. She's back, she said. Yes, I replied. and stronger. A month later, a final message arrived from Adrian. Not an apology. A warning. You think you won. This isn't over. Olivia read it once, then blocked the number. She didn't tell me until days later. I don't need closure from him, she said. I already closed the door. I nodded, but somewhere deep inside I knew people like Adrian don't end stories. They wait for the last word. And the last word hadn't been spoken yet. Naomi stayed up late that first night, long after Evelyn went to bed. I found her at the kitchen table sometime after midnight, a mug of untouched tea cooling between her hands. She was staring at the dark window like it might answer questions she hadn't yet learned how to ask. You can't sleep either, I said softly. She shook her head. I keep replaying everything. The last 3 years. All the moments I thought I was being strong, when I was really just being steered. I sat across from her. The house was quiet in the way it only ever was after midnight. Pipes ticking, the refrigerator humming, old floorboards settling like tired bones. He never raised his voice, she continued. That's the part that scares me now. He didn't have to. He just planned an idea and wait. Your parents don't respect your independence. They don't trust your judgment. They're trying to control you. After a while, it felt like defending myself instead of listening. I nodded. That's how manipulation works. It convinces you that isolation is autonomy. Her eyes filled. When you showed up at my door that day, I wasn't angry because you were wrong. I was angry because a part of me knew you were right, and admitting that meant admitting I'd made a mistake. We sat with that truth between us. I should have fought harder, I said quietly. I should have found a way to reach you without pushing. She reached across the table and took my hand. You tried. I just wasn't ready to hear it. The next morning, Naomi made a phone call I knew had been coming. She stepped onto the back porch with her phone, closing the door gently behind her. I didn't listen, but I didn't need to. I could tell by the way her shoulders squared that this wasn't a conversation. It was a declaration. When she came back inside, her face was pale but steady. I told him I was filing for divorce, she said. He didn't deny the letter. Didn't even try. He just kept saying he was under pressure and that he'd planned to pay the money back. After pretending to be you, Evelyn said sharply, after forging your handwriting. He said he was desperate. Naomi replied, that he thought it was the only way. I felt something settle in my chest then, not anger, not satisfaction, finality. Desperation explains actions, I said. It doesn't excuse them. Naomi nodded. He threatened me. Evelyn stiffened. How? He said if I told anyone, if I went to the police, he'd make sure I regretted it. Said he knew things. About me, about my work. That was the moment the situation shifted from emotional betrayal to something darker. You're not handling this alone, I said firmly. Not anymore. Over the next 2 days, the truth unraveled faster than any of us expected. Naomi found bank statements she'd never seen before. Cash withdrawals. Transfers routed through shell accounts. Casino markers disguised as business expenses. The handwriting practice sheets were just the beginning. By Thursday evening, she sat on the living room floor surrounded by documents, her hands shaking, not from fear now, but from clarity. He's been lying to me since before we were married, she said hollowly. The debt, the business trips, the late nights, and the isolation, Evelyn added. That didn't start 3 years ago. It started the moment he made himself the only voice you trusted. Naomi looked up at me. You were never the problem. I didn't say anything. Some confirmations don't need words. The call from Ethan came late Friday afternoon. I answered it. Ralph, he said smoothly, like nothing had happened. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, I replied. There's been a pattern. A pause, then a sigh. Naomi's upset. You know how she gets. Emotional. She's blowing this out of proportion. You forged her handwriting. I said calmly. You impersonated her. You tried to steal money from her parents. Another pause, longer this time. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I understand it perfectly, I said. And I understand something else too. What's that? You're not calling to apologize. You're calling to see how exposed you are. His breath caught. Naomi has copies of everything. I continued. Bank records. Practice sheets. The letter. And she's done protecting you. Silence. Then, very quietly, you think you won. I looked at the wall where Naomi's childhood photos still hung. First day of school. Missing tooth. Awkward teenage grin. No, I said. I think you finished. He hung up without another word. That night, Naomi slept for first time without pacing. And for first time in years, the house felt full again, not just with people, but with truth. But the story wasn't over. It was only just beginning to balance itself. The police were not Naomi's first call. That surprised me. She waited until Saturday morning, after the house had settled into its familiar rhythm again. Evelyn was in the kitchen, humming softly as she kneaded dough. The radio played low. Outside, the rain from the night before had washed the street clean, leaving everything sharp and bright. Naomi sat at the dining table with her laptop open, staring at the screen like it might argue back. I want to understand everything before I do this, she said. I don't want to walk in sounding confused or emotional. I want facts. I nodded. Then you're doing it the right way. She exhaled slowly. I hate that he turned me into someone who doubts her own instincts. He didn't turn you into that, Evelyn said gently. He exploited it. There's a difference. For the next 4 hours, Naomi rebuilt her own life from paper. She logged into accounts she hadn't touched in years, requested statements, tracked transfers. Every time she uncovered something new, her mouth tightened, not in shock, but in recognition. He always handled the finances, she murmured, said it stressed me out. That line sounded familiar. By early afternoon, the dining table looked like a forensic workspace. Bank records, casino statements, screenshots of transactions, copies of emails Ethan had insisted were junk. And there it was again, a pattern. This isn't just gambling, Naomi said quietly. This is escalation. I leaned over her shoulder. Say that again. He didn't just lose money, she said. He chased it, doubled down, lied to cover lies. The letter wasn't a one-off. It was a test. I felt a chill. A test for what? To see how much he could take without being questioned. The realization sat heavy in the room. Evelyn folded her hands. If you hadn't noticed the handwriting, Naomi swallowed. He would have kept going. That was the moment Naomi closed the laptop. I'm calling the police, she said. The station was quiet when we arrived. Midday on a Saturday. Fluorescent lights. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor. A faint smell of old coffee and disinfectant. Naomi spoke first. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She laid everything out with the calm precision of someone who had finally stopped protecting the wrong person. The officer listened, asked questions, took copies. When Naomi finished, the woman across the desk leaned back slightly. This isn't just fraud, she said. This is identity impersonation, financial coercion, and potentially more. Naomi's jaw tightened. More, if he was under pressure from creditors or illegal lenders. Impersonating you to extract money could be part of a broader scheme. I saw Naomi's hands tremble, not with fear, but with anger she'd held back for years. What happens now? She asked. We open an investigation, the officer said. And we'll need to speak with your husband. Ex-husband, Naomi corrected silently. The first message from Ethan came that night. Not to Naomi. To me. I don't know what she told you, it read, but she's confused. She's emotional. You've always had a way of turning her against me. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I deleted it. The second message came an hour later. You think this ends well for her? That one I saved. The third never arrived. Because by Sunday morning, Ethan had vanished. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment was empty. Naomi's credit card, one she hadn't used in months, had been charged at a motel outside the city. He's running, Naomi said flatly when the officer called her back. Yes, the officer replied. And people don't run unless they're afraid of what stays behind. The days that followed were strange. Quiet but charged. Naomi stayed with us. Not like a guest. Like someone who had simply returned to a place she'd always belonged. She helped Evelyn cook, fixed a loose hinge on the hall cabinet, sat with me on the porch in the evenings, watching the light fade from the sky. I used to think independence meant doing everything alone, she said one night. Now I think it means knowing who you don't have to protect yourself from. I smiled. That's wisdom. It comes late to most of us. The call came on Wednesday. They'd found him. Not far. A cheap rental. Cash payment. 2 phones. And something else. He wasn't just in debt, the detective told Naomi. He was being leaned on. By who? She asked. People who don't send polite reminders. The words didn't need elaboration. He was planning another letter. The detective continued. Different amount. Different story. Same handwriting practice. Naomi closed her eyes. So, if my parents hadn't caught the first one, he would have kept going, the detective said. The silence afterward was heavy. That night, Naomi cried for the first time since coming home. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sobs into Evelyn's shoulder. I feel stupid, she whispered. Evelyn stroked her hair. You feel human. I stood in the doorway, listening, understanding something painful and necessary. This wasn't just about a scam. It was about how close we came to losing each other without realizing it. The official charges came a week later. Fraud, identity theft, attempted financial coercion. Ethan pleaded not guilty. Of course he did. His lawyer painted a familiar picture. A stress man, a misunderstanding, a family conflict exaggerated by emotion. But facts don't care about charm. The handwriting samples matched. The practice sheets were dated. The digital trail was clean, cold, undeniable. Naomi testified. She didn't look at him once. I trusted him, she said evenly, and he used that trust as a tool. When the judge asked if she had anything else to add, she paused. Yes, she said. This didn't start with money. It started with isolation. That sentence changed the room. The verdict didn't come immediately, but the truth had already landed. And as we walked out of the courthouse together, Naomi reached for my hand the way she had when she was small. I don't feel broken anymore, she said quietly. I feel awake. I squeezed her hand. That's how healing usually feels. And somewhere behind us, a door closed, not with anger, not with regret, but with finality. The waiting was harder than the confrontation. Court dates are like that. They stretch time, pull moments thin until every ordinary day feels like it's holding its breath. Naomi stayed with us through it all. At first, she said it was temporary, just until things settled. But after a few weeks, the word temporary quietly disappeared from our conversations. Life adjusted around her presence, as if it had always been meant to. She took morning walks with Evelyn, helped me fix the old screen door that had been sticking for years, started cooking again, really cooking. The way she used when she was younger, experimenting, leaving the kitchen a disaster, and laughing about it. One evening, as she washed dishes beside Evelyn, she said, I didn't realize how quiet my life had become. Evelyn glanced at her. Quiet can be peaceful, or it can be lonely. The difference matters. Naomi nodded slowly. I think I confused silence with strength. The next message from Ethan came through his lawyer. A proposal. He wanted to settle, drop charges, make it all go away. He claimed stress, addiction, fear, promised treatment, promised restitution. Naomi read the email twice, then closed her laptop. No, she said simply. I didn't ask why. I already knew. Some things, she added, don't deserve negotiation. The trial resumed in early spring. This time, the courtroom felt different. Less tension, more inevitability. Ethan looked smaller. Not physically, though the expensive clothes were gone, but diminished, like someone who had finally run out of stories to tell himself. When Naomi testified again, she spoke not just as a victim, but as someone reclaiming ownership of her own narrative. He didn't just take money, she said. He took certainty. He made me doubt what I saw, what I felt, what I remembered. That's the part that lasted the longest. The judge listened carefully. So did the jury. The handwriting expert sealed it. In large samples projected on a screen. Slants. Pressure points. Muscle memory. Truth doesn't need drama. It just needs light. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty. Ethan didn't look at Naomi when it was read. He didn't look at me either. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if defiance alone might rewrite reality. It didn't. Outside the courthouse, reporters lingered. Naomi kept her head down. We walked past without comment. The car ride home was quiet. Not heavy, just thoughtful. I don't feel relief the way I expected. Naomi said after a while, "What do you feel?" I asked. "Clear," she said. Like something toxic finally left my system. That night, Evelyn made a small celebration dinner. Nothing fancy. Roast chicken, vegetables, a pie she'd frozen months ago just in case. To endings, Evelyn said softly, raising her glass. And beginnings, Naomi added. I watched them, heartful in a way that surprised me. Not joy exactly. Something steadier. Peace doesn't announce itself. It settles in. A month later, Naomi moved back into her old room officially. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. She found a new job, closer, calmer. Turned down an offer that would have doubled her salary, but tripled her stress. I'm done proving things to people who don't protect me, she said. She also wrote the letter she'd promised. A real one. She gave it to me folded carefully, handwritten, unmistakably hers. I didn't open it right away. I held it first. Sometimes, the existence of something matters more than its contents. When I did read it later, alone, I cried, not because of apologies, because of honesty. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't return to what it was before. It became something better. One afternoon, as Naomi and I sat on the porch watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes, she asked, "Why didn't you ever stop trying, even when I shut you out?" I thought about it for a long time. Because love isn't transaction, I said finally. You don't withdraw it when it isn't returned on schedule. She nodded. I wish I'd known that sooner. You know it now, Evelyn said from the doorway. That's what counts. The house felt full again. Not loud, not chaotic. Full. And somewhere, quietly, a long chapter had closed. Not with anger or bitterness, but with understanding. The kind that only comes when truth finally catches up with lies. And stays. Spring settled into summer, almost without us noticing. That's what healing does. It doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in through open windows, through routine, through mornings that no longer feel heavy. Naomi began waking early again, not out of anxiety, but purpose. She started running before work. Something she used to love before her life became a series of compromises disguised as adulthood. Evelyn noticed it first. She hums again. She whispered to me one morning as Naomi passed through the kitchen, earbuds in, hair still damp from a shower. I smiled. I thought I imagined that. No, Evelyn said. You don't hum when you're afraid. Naomi's divorce finalized quietly. No drama. No grand courtroom showdown. Ethan accepted the terms quickly, too quickly. His attorney likely advised him that fighting further would only deepen the hole he was already in. When Naomi came home from signing the papers, she didn't cry. She went straight to the backyard and sat on the old wooden bench beneath the maple tree, the one we'd planted when she was 12. I joined her without speaking. After a while, she said, I kept waiting for it to hurt more. And I asked, It already did, she replied. For years. That was the truth of it. Pain doesn't always announce its end. Sometimes it just stops renewing itself. She asked me to walk with her that evening. We took the long route around the neighborhood, past houses she remembered from childhood, past a park where she'd fallen off her bike and sworn she'd never ride again. I think I mistook endurance for love, she said suddenly. How so? I stayed because I thought leaving meant I failed. I thought if I endured enough, things would eventually become safe. I stopped walking. She turned to face me. Love, I said carefully, doesn't require you to survive it. She exhaled sharply, like someone releasing a weight, they hadn't known they were carrying. A week later, something unexpected happened. Naomi received an email from Ethan's sister, an apology, not defensive, not performative, direct. She acknowledged she'd suspected something was wrong for a long time. She admitted she'd stayed silent to avoid family conflict. She said she was sorry for believing Ethan over Naomi, for enabling behavior she didn't want to confront. Naomi read it twice, then closed her laptop. "I don't hate her," she said, "but I don't trust her either." "You don't owe her forgiveness," Evelyn said gently. "You owe yourself peace." Naomi nodded. "That's what I'm choosing." The next step came quietly. Therapy. Not because she was broken, but because she was done pretending she wasn't hurt. Every Thursday evening, she returned thoughtful, sometimes tired, sometimes lighter. She says I confuse responsibility with self-sacrifice. Naomi told us once, half laughing. Apparently that's a pattern. Evelyn smiled knowingly. Runs in families. Summer deepened. The house became warmer. Not just in temperature, but spirit. Friends started coming by. Naomi invited co-workers over for dinner. Laughter returned to rooms that had been quiet for too long. One evening, as we cleaned up after guests left, Naomi said, "I used to think this place was small." I looked around. The familiar walls, the scuffed floor, the photos that had never moved. And now it feels solid, she said, like it won't disappear if I lean on it. That sentence stayed with me, because that was the difference. Her old life looked impressive, but it collapsed under weight. This one held. Then came the letter. Another one. Different envelope. Different handwriting. From the district attorney's office. They wanted Naomi to consider speaking at a fraud prevention seminar, not as a victim, but as someone who recognized manipulation before it destroyed her completely. She hesitated. "I don't want my worst years to become my identity," she said. "They won't," I replied. "There'll be context." She agreed to do it. The night before the event, she barely slept. "What if I freeze?" she asked. "What if I sound foolish?" "You won't," Evelyn said firmly, "because foolish people don't question themselves as much." The seminar was held in a modest community center. Folding chairs, coffee in paper cups, a handful of professionals, some seniors, a few young couples. Nothing intimidating. But when Naomi stepped up to the podium, her hands trembled slightly. She took a breath. Then she began. "I didn't think manipulation looked like danger," she said. "I thought it looked like reassurance." The room leaned in. She talked about isolation, about subtle erosion, about how trust can be redirected slowly until you no longer recognize its destination. She didn't dramatize. She didn't accuse. She explained. And when she finished, people stood, not because they were told to, because they recognized themselves. On the drive home, Naomi was quiet. Then she said, "I think I took something back tonight." "What?" I asked. "My voice." Autumn arrived gently. Leaves turned. Air cooled. Time moved forward. Naomi began dating again, but slowly, carefully, with boundaries she didn't apologize for. "I don't want fireworks," she told Evelyn one night. "I want reliability." That, Evelyn said approvingly, is very grown. Then came the moment that surprised me most. One evening, Naomi sat beside me at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. "What's this?" I asked. "My savings plan," she said, "and a new will." I raised an eyebrow. She smiled softly. "Not because I'm afraid. Because I finally understand how fragile certainty can be." She slid one page toward me. "I named you and Evelyn as my medical proxies," she said. "If anything ever happens." My throat tightened. "You don't have to." "I want to," she said firmly. "You were always protecting me. I just forgot that for a while." I nodded, unable to speak. Winter came. The first snow fell quietly, coating the yard in white. Naomi stood at the window, mug in hand. "Do you ever think about how close things came to going wrong?" she asked. "All the time," I said honestly. "And yet," she said, "we're here." "Yes," Evelyn added from behind us. That's the part that matters. Later that night, Naomi knocked on my study door. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the letter. The fake one." Yes. If Evelyn hadn't noticed the handwriting, everything would be different. I nodded. "She saved us," Naomi said quietly. Evelyn overheard from the hallway and shook her head. "No," she said. "You saved yourself the moment you chose truth over comfort." Naomi smiled, and in that moment, I knew something profound had shifted, not just in her life, in ours. We weren't recovering anymore. We were living. And whatever came next, whatever challenges waited beyond the horizon, we would meet them together, not naive, not afraid, aware, and stronger for it. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Not dramatic, not urgent, just a number I didn't recognize. Lighting up my phone while I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a mug. "Mr. Hale?" the woman asked. "Yes, this is Assistant District Attorney Laura Chun. I'm calling regarding the fraud investigation connected to Ethan Morris." I closed my eyes, not from fear, but from something closer to inevitability. "Yes," I said. "I expected your call." She paused, just long enough to confirm something important. "We finalized the charges." I sat down slowly. "They uncovered more than we anticipated," she continued. "Multiple victims, forged letters, digital transfers, false medical claims. Your family wasn't the first, just the one that stopped it." I felt a strange mix of relief and grief settle into my chest. "And Naomi?" I asked. "She's not implicated in any way," Chin said immediately. "Her cooperation was clear, credible, and appreciated." I exhaled. "There will be a formal hearing next month. Ethan has been advised to plead, but," she hesitated, "that's out of our control." After I hung up, I stayed seated longer than necessary. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because something old and heavy had finally lost its grip. When Naomi came home that evening, she read my face before I spoke. "It's happening," I said. She nodded once. "I know." She didn't ask details. She didn't spiral. She went upstairs, changed into comfortable clothes, and joined Evelyn in the garden to pull weeds. That's how I knew she was truly free. The hearing was quiet. No press. No spectacle. Ethan looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like a man whose borrowed confidence had finally expired. He didn't look at Naomi. She didn't look at him. The judge read the charges in a measured voice. Wire fraud. Identity misuse. Coercive manipulation. Pattern deception. The words stacked up like bricks. When it was over, Naomi stood and walked out without hesitation. Outside the courthouse, she paused. "I thought I'd feel something," she said. And she considered. "I feel done." That was enough. Life after closure doesn't explode into happiness. It simplifies. Naomi moved into her own apartment in early spring. Not extravagant. Not temporary. Intentional. She invited us over the first night. The furniture was mismatched. The walls bare. But the place felt like her. "This is the first home I've chosen," she said. Evelyn hugged her hard. "You chose well." Weeks turned into months. Naomi thrived. Not loudly, not performatively, but steadily. She received a promotion she didn't chase. She started mentoring younger employees. She laughed more easily. One evening, she came over with a folder. "I'm starting something," she said. "A blog." "No," she smiled. "A workshop. For women who feel confused all the time but don't know why." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's very specific." Naomi nodded. "Because confusion is usually taught." The workshops filled quickly, then doubled, then outgrew their space. Naomi didn't brand herself as a survivor. She framed herself as a translator, helping people understand what their instincts had been trying to say. One night, long after Evelyn had gone to bed, Naomi and I sat on the porch. "You never said, 'I told you so,'" she said suddenly. I smiled faintly. "That wouldn't have helped." She nodded. "Still, thank you." "For what?" "For letting me come back without punishment." I looked at her. "You were never gone," I said. You were just lost. She swallowed hard. I don't feel lost anymore. That summer, Evelyn fell ill. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to remind us that time does not negotiate. Naomi rearranged her life without being asked. Doctor visits, groceries, quiet companionship. One afternoon, as Evelyn rested, Naomi stood beside me in the hallway. I used to think strength meant standing alone, she said softly. And now I think strength is knowing who you don't have to be alone without. Evelyn recovered fully, but something else had changed. We were no longer a family defined by what nearly broke us. We were defined by what held. The final letter came a year later. Handwritten, careful, real. Naomi's handwriting, undeniably hers. It arrived on an ordinary afternoon. No drama, no warning, just truth. I opened it slowly. Dad, I wanted to write this the old way. Paper, ink, time. I don't know how to explain what it means to come home to yourself after living in someone else's shadow. But I know this. You and Mom were the light I kept walking toward, even when I pretended I wasn't looking. I'm building a life that doesn't require shrinking or explaining. And I couldn't have done that without knowing you were still there, steady, patient, unafraid of the truth. Thank you for waiting without demanding, for protecting without controlling, for loving without conditions. I'm not writing because I'm healed. I'm writing because I'm honest, and because honesty brought me back. Love, always. Naomi. I folded the letter carefully, placed it where it belonged, and for the first time in years, I felt something settle completely. Not relief, not triumph, peace. Because the strongest thing we ever did wasn't confronting deception. It was recognizing truth and choosing it, even when it hurt. And that choice changed everything. If my story meant something to you, if you've ever doubted your instincts, ignored quiet warning, or wondered whether reconnection was still possible, stay with us. Share where you're watching from, and subscribe so these stories reach the people who need them most. Sometimes the truth arrives softly, but it always leaves an echo,